Yes, we're gonna play the Perlman one, right?
Yes.
So this might be the most famous setting for Psalm 23, which at CBST we sing a lot at Yizkor and at funerals, and I'll talk a little bit about it afterwards. This is a very famous cantor singing with Yitzhak Perlman on violin. Pretty wonderful. The recording's not perfect, but I love that it's the two of them. So was that a familiar setting to people? Did that sound familiar? We sing that at CBST a lot, and it's probably the single most famous Jewish setting for the Psalm 23, although there are a gazillion settings and we're going to explore them. It was composed by an American Hasidic composer named Ben Zion Schenker. So at CBST, we call that, and the world calls it the Schenker Mizmor LeDavid. If you went to YouTube, you could find many singers performing this, choruses. There are choral settings to it, all different kinds of settings. And when Joyce and Sam come to our class, I'm sure we'll explore the musical narrative that Ben Zion Schenker did. It's interesting to note about him. He was part of the Hasidic dynasty called the Mozhitz dynasty, and we had seen they are a dynasty that's particularly known for their melodies. The Mozhitzer Rabbi was very famous for his nigunim, and Ben Zion Schenker spent a lot of his career collecting and recording them. And there's a whole collection of Mozhitzer nigunim that Ben Zion Schenker. So his two most famous compositions, he wrote a lot of music. He was very much a part of the Ashkenazi Chazonisha tradition of writing, but he was 20th century. These are not melodies from the 17th century, although they're so common, people think they're from forever. The other very famous setting he wrote is Eishes Chayil, the melody to Eishes Chayil. Was written in the 20th century. You know, people think that melody, the Woman of Valor, the very famous melody for that was written by the same composer, Ben Zion Schenker. And he lived in New York. And this recording is fabulous because it's a very famous cantor singing in real Ashkenazish with Perlman on violin. How fantastic is that? And you might have noticed, if your ear was sensitive to it, that he didn't use God's name when he sang, which is classical, and any Orthodox musician, when they sing a psalm or a prayer in a concert setting, they will not use God's name. They'll use some metaphor usually they use Hashem, and you could hear the Ashkenazi pronunciation and emphasis of the syllables. It's a pretty classic, fantastic setting. And we'll be sharing more as we go through. And and it's a wonderful setting to learn if you don't already know it, because it's sung all the time. We at CBST, we use that setting for funerals and for Yizkor all the time. So it's definitely a way to participate, is to know that setting. And the way we refer to it is the Schenker Mizmor LeDavid. And I wrote his name so you could go to YouTube. And you don't say Psalm 23. If you say Psalm 23, mostly you'll come up with Christian musical settings. So you have to say Schenker Mizmor LeDavid. So for Jews, if you say Mizmor LeDavid, it means the 23rd Psalm, even though, as you know, many Psalms begin with Mizmor LeDavid. When it's referred to as a Psalm, that's how we Jews tend to refer to the Psalm, Mizmor LeDavid. Okay, well, hello, everybody. It was so much fun to be with you from Jerusalem last week, and I got home about 4:30 this morning. So I'm still on Israel time, which, hi, Sherry and Debbie. So it means, Harold, I'm not sure I'm going to make it to the executive committee tonight. Let's see, I'm still on Israel time, so it's early evening, but oi gewalt, I'm not sure the executive committee I'm going to be functional. We'll see how it goes, how the day goes. Today is a very big day for Israel politics. The Knesset just elected the new president, and the name of the new president of Israel is somebody by the name of Yitzhak or Isaac Herzog, also known as Bougie for some reason. I have no idea, but everybody calls him Bougie. And I think it's very good that he was elected. He's a very solid. His problem is that he's not a very dynamic person, so people think of him as a little bit of a nebbish. He's not. He's a very thoughtful. He's been a very good leader in Israel, and he has a lot of experience of living in America too. So he really, first of all, he speaks English well, which is important for any president of the state of Israel, and he knows America. He understands and cares about American Jews, and Anyway, so that, Yael, it's not really true anymore. It's not just a ceremonial position. Look how much Rivlin was able to accomplish in the face of Netanyahu's racism and negativity. Rivlin was able to really put forth a very positive image of intergroup respect. And yes, he's not the head of the government in the way that the prime minister governs, but it's a very important position, especially as it relates to Israel and the outside world. So the president also is the one to whom the government must be presented. And tonight, we're still waiting to hear if the evil witch of Israel, Ayelet Shaked, is going to torpedo this government. And it's going to be down to the last minute. I don't know, what time is it in Israel? It has to be done by midnight tonight. Or what time is it? 5
p.m.
Bad at math. Okay, so it's 5 p.m. So they still have another 5 to midnight hours, however many hours those are. And if Ayelet Shaked is successful, the government won't be able to present a coalition. And this is terrible. But I don't have time now because we're going to go to explain that. We are going to do a town hall Monday, open to everybody, to talk about my reflections on the trip and kind of to talk about what's happening in current events there. But today is a very important day in the 73-year history of the Jewish people and the state of Israel. Today is a very important day. And whether or not this very shaky coalition of 8 parties can hold at midnight tonight, they have to present to the government, or else it starts. The easiest way to say it is that it kind of goes back to square one. And so these 8 parties have to have every single member of their party agree, or else the whole coalition falls apart. And right now, Naftali Bennett, who will be the prime minister, if this party agrees, and he only has 7 mandates, I think, or 8, I don't remember. He has 1 member of his group of 7 who is an evil witch, if I may say so. And she is threatening to blow the whole thing up. So we're waiting for this one woman and what she will have to get. So she's holding out. She's basically holding the whole thing hostage and asking for completely unrealistic amounts of power in order to join the group. And Bibi has been threatening violence in all different kinds of ways. And Tamar Zandberg, who is a wonderful member of Knesset, who I saw when I was in the Randy when I were in the Knesset, she has had to take her family out of their home and go to kind of a safe house because of the threats from some in the right wing to harm her child and her. Anyway, and they're worried there about a January 6th-like attack on the Knesset by Bibi's people. But Monday night, I'll give you more details. Let's go to the Psalms. So how was it studying the Hebrew, and how was it while I was gone? Anybody want to give a little report how it was?
Okay, I'm looking for participants to report out from studying your verse yesterday. Hands in.
It's not
chat.
Easy, huh? It's not easy.
Well, actually,
okay. How'd it go?
I will jump in that it is just as rich to study word by word or letter by letter as it is to study the whole psalm. We spent a good 15 minutes on one line, and I had Lisa Brown and Sarah Sloan, and we had the BDB out, try to find out their translations and then bring in other things. I will say that as I said to you, we were discussing whether ma'agle has anything to do with the word for circle in Hebrew. That was a suggestion. And whether Yeshovev was from Shuv, which seems to be the majority opinion, or Yael suggested that it might have some relation to Shovev. So we really got down into the molecular level.
That's the fun of
still
doing
waiting
that
for
level.
someone,
what?
I'm waiting for someone else to raise their.
Okay, so I think what we're going to do today.
Out on their group. Everyone was so excited yesterday.
Okay, well, why don't we jump in, and if people want to offer things, I think we're going to start to keep moving through the Psalm, and then we'll also take other time, not today, we're not going to do Chavruta today, but we'll do it in other days, and you can keep working on this on your own. And really, see, as I said, I like writing on a piece of paper so I can write notes, and I have it all I do my different questions, but whatever way you do it. And if the Hebrew is too hard, do not worry. So let's go to Levi, okay, Harold? Shall we go back to Levi?
Why not?
Why not?
You don't have to be Jewish to love Levi, right?
You're dating yourself.
I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, hold on. Levi, okay. Although I will have to say that having read it carefully, I don't love Levi this much for this one. I know that I had it up. Hold on. Levi. Coming. Computer's slow this morning.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Judy, I think you have a good point. I think we need to figure out how to do it so people are on the same level. Up there's the bougie Jack. Thank you for that little. So watch out for him. I think he's giving a speech to diaspora Jews sometime. I don't know. He's announced it when, but.
You know what, Rabbi?
Okay. Can we get up any Hebrew and just get up some Hebrew?
I can pull up something else. I can pull
up something else. I'm just going to work through the Hebrew with folks, and we're going to start to just get deeper and deeper. And I know some of you are even working on memorizing it. And if you know the Shanker, you might know it. The problem with memorizing the Shanker version is that words get repeated. So that's a little confusing if you're, okay.
How's this?
Perfect. I'm just going to walk through the Hebrew with folks. If you have, does everybody have your text in front of you? So you have also.
Okay.
So again, 6 verses. God's name is found in 2 of the 6 verses, in the first verse and in the 6th verse. So even the presence of God's name creates a little bit of a bookend. That it starts out, and the name of God that we have here, the Yud He Vav He, is the most powerful, the most, the deepest sense of infinity that exists in the name of God. So, and there is no other name of God, though there's references to God. So in the first verse, we have Yud He Vav He on the 3rd word of the first verse. And then we have Yud He Vav He, the 3rd to last word in the last verse. So does everybody see that? So it really creates kind of a symmetry of a bookend. Yud He Vav He in the 3rd word, and then Yud He Vav He in the 3rd to last word. And it really creates yes, so that's the first thing, as I said, we look where and which of God's names. There's a sense of balance that and many comment on the power of comfort that this brings. Mizmor LeDavid, as we discussed, it's a superscription. And then the Yud He Vav He, Ro'i, should that be translated as Yud He Vav He is my shepherd? Or Yud He Vav He, my shepherd, comma, lo echsar? And that's an open grammatical question. As I said when I was with you last week, part of the problem is that the King James Version, as beautiful as it is, locks into our minds, the Lord is my shepherd. And we imagine that's the only way to read this. It's not true, but that is, so they're making a decision in that translation. But Levi does not. And that's one of the reasons I like Levi, is that he tries to get us to think a little bit more deeply about the psalm itself. And not accept, and this is what's hard about a psalm that's well known, is that it's that sound of the psalm becomes the only way we might look at it. We talked a little bit about the noun. So for a ro'ah, or is the shepherd, a ro'i is my shepherd, lo echsar, I will not feel a lack, I will not feel a want. And again, we compared this, or I tried to show you that the contrast with Psalm 22, which starts Lama Lama Azavtani. There's such a sense of being abandoned. This is a huge contrast. This is a sense of being taken care of. Maybe, in fact, the total, 180 degree from what would it feel like to be, what's the opposite of being abandoned of Psalm 22? Looks like Psalm 23, so that the feeling of being deeply taken care of, not having a want. It doesn't mean you have everything you might imagine, but you have everything that you actually need. Okay, Psalm verse 2. So that's verse 1. Verse 2. Now, if we looked at the Hebrew, and remember, I don't know if you've done this in your work on your own, or where would you find, remember the ending suffix that is for my or me? We see it in verse 1, row E, the E ending, the dot under the chirik underneath the ayin, and the yud makes the pronominal suffix, meaning that at the end of the word it says mine. And in Hebrew, that's very strong. So row E, and then in the second sentence, we have two other words, yarbitseini and yinahaleni. One of the things that you should do going through the whole psalm for those who can read Hebrew is to identify all the E endings, all the I, my, I, me endings. And you see it's a dominant suffix in the psalm. That's not always true. It's very much becomes a rhythm to the words that you hear in the music of the psalm. And I don't mean the compositional music, I mean the words. You hear this E over and over again, which is the equivalent in English of saying mine or me, but it has a rhythm to it because it ends up sounding very personal. And so that's the second thing you'll see. And if you looked at verse 3, and I'm just going to go through a couple of the verses to point it out. And Harold, maybe you could, the nafshi, yanachani. There it is again. Gam ki elech begetz lo yata imadi in the next sentence. Yanachamuni there also. It's very personal. Taroch lefanai is mine. Neged zorai, roshi, kosi, all these endings. There we go. Thank you, Harold. Look at that. Look at that. And of course, Harold has to do this because of the computer, that nun, etc. It's not really part of it, but you can't do this part. Roshi, kosi, kosi, yirdafuni, vishavti. Good. So just looking at the color, you can see how much the psalm is about my relationship with God. Just even this visual gives you a sense of how often that appears. Okay, so verse 2, Benot Desha, Yarbitseni. Yarbitseni is a word which clearly means something about Levy translates it, in meadows thick with grass, you lay me down. And it's a word of being put to sleep, even for not put to sleep in the bad way. The intention, as Levy says, it only says in meadows of grass, but Levy likes the emphasis because he thinks that's what they're trying to get to there. That sense of real, like how you would feel. I got to turn on the AC, sorry. You lay me down. Now, Yarbit Seini, Almei Menuchot. This is a description using the natural world, but obviously it can function naturally or it can function metaphorically. So you lay me down in the grasses and you lay me down. The question is whether this is across or next to waters or streams. Levy calls it across streams serene in Haleni, you guide me. Okay, so then verse 3, nafshi, and this is, I think people looked at this verse or the fourth verse yesterday. This one?
A lot of us looked at verse 3.
Okay, so verse 3, nafshi, nefesh. As we said, it doesn't only mean soul as it does in modern Hebrew. It means my whole life, my breath. It could mean my breath, which in this world of the George Floyd certainly starts to have whole new layers of contemporary meanings. Nafshi yeshovev, my breath, you have yeshovev, the root of yeshovev is shin, either yud or vav vet, which means lashuv, to return, lahashiv, to restore. So this is the people, I know Harold said you asked about the double bet there. That's because the form of this verb in the Hebrew declension gets a double letter when it's intensifying. So usually this is translated as the intensified form of the declension. So it means in a very strong way. It's not a, so nafshi yeshovev. That's why it gets different kinds of words, because restore is supposed to sound stronger than return. It's supposed to be a level intensified from just to return. So Yael, what do you think it is?
So I think Yeshovev is not about return. I think it's about, from the word shovav, something happy. So shin vet vet as opposed to shin vav vet.
I have never seen that as a, and did you see any of the references to that in BDB? Does that verb exist in biblical Hebrew? For meaning happy?
I pulled up the BDB page, which is 3 pages for shuv.
I know.
And BDB seems confident that it is shuv, as do all the other notes that I looked at. But that doesn't mean that, you know, Yael is bringing something.
So the way, what we would have to do with Yael is to find out if any other biblical places this meant that, because this is a pretty classic form of the Pilel form where the second letter is doubled in the declension. That's why nobody's translating it as return. They're translating the idea when the word restore is used, it's a little stronger than return. So I would have to do research and really look to see if that understanding of the verb existed in biblical times. Is there any other reference to it? And honestly, there's no way to rule it out, right? Because maybe it did and we don't have evidence, and your interpretation is perfect, you know, so that nobody can say you're wrong. I would say the vast evidence indicates otherwise, but that doesn't mean you're wrong, because as I said, we don't have any Hebrew speakers who lived then to tell us, oh, did you ever use it this way? And BDB is the best we have because it compares every possible use of it. But all that being said, it doesn't mean that can't be your drash on the verse, right? Even if it didn't mean it then, there's no reason you can't play with it today with what you bring to it. Totally fine. Totally fine. But it is the form is pretty perfect for this form of the for the verb. But again, I love your interpretation and adds a beautiful layer to it. And so you see nafshi. So we have the my soul, yeshovev yancheni. So that you see this, it really creates a rhythm of personal. Now in this verse, the question is, how are we referring to Yud He Vav He? The name isn't here. I mean, the word for Yud He Vav He isn't here. But is the speaker speaking directly to Yud He Vav He or about Yud He Vav He? Is it second person or third person? For those of you who are comfortable with the, so we see in this verse, it says Shemo, which means his name, literally the O ending. So in this verse, in fact, the first 3 verses can be read a little bit as the speaker is speaking about a relationship with Yud He Vav He. Does everybody see what I mean? Does anybody not see that? Because this is important. The speaker is really speaking about their relationship. It's personal, but and this is one of the things I've tried to point out at different times about the Psalms. The Psalms can be the speaker speaking about, and what's the other option? Verse 4. Verse 4 in Psalm 23 is the fulcrum verse, is the fulcrum verse, and here we shift from the speaker speaking about their relationship with Yud He Vav He and describing an image of pastoral. It's beautiful, right? It's so comforting, and there's nothing scary here. It's very I will be led through paths of righteousness for the sake of God's name. It's very correct. It's very comforting, but there's a little distance there. Boom, here comes a sentence, a pasuk gimel, pasuk dalid, and the gam. And remember, anytime, and this is, we can look at this issue for this psalm, anytime a biblical sentence does not begin with a verb, it is for some kind of emphasis, which is very different than English. So it's hard for us to see that. So you just have to trust me that whenever a pasuk, a verse does not begin with a verb, there's some kind of emphasis. So for instance, in 3, nafshi, my whole living being, it's talking about this. It's not just God did this to me, right? Okay, gam. So gam is the sentence, is the word that is the pivot word for this incredibly brilliant, moving psalm. Gam. Gam can mean also. It can mean in spite of, or because of, or as a result of. It's some kind of, it's a, what do you call it? It's a conjunctive, and it joins the sentence, but it's some kind of emphatic disjunctive here. And how a translator translates gam is also an indicator of a lot of things, and very interesting how they do it. Alter translates it as though. Levy translates it as even when I walk. So we'll see. What's also really good to look for, how does the translator get to meaning in that gam, because it's a very important pivot word. Gam ki. Ki is also a word which can mean a gazillion things. Ki, because, or Alter says, though I, gam ki, meaning gam ki, even when, elech. So this is the verb lalechet. So elech is the imperfect or the future, but the imperfect, even though I am walking. Beh is the bet means in, and gay, gimel yud aleph means a valley. And it's a very standard word for a valley. There are other words for a valley. Emek can be a valley, gay. So for people might remember from any trips to Israel with me and walking tours around Jerusalem, there's Gay Hinnom, the valley of Hinnom. Gay is a very common word in the Bible, and it means valley. Baka also means valley. So there are different words, but gay means valley. It doesn't mean gay as in happy or homosexual. It literally just means valley. Begay salmavet. And this has the pausal cantillation mark on salmavet. Gam kielech, even when I am moving begay in the valley of salmavet, which has a gazillion understandings, and we're gonna do it quickly now, but we'll keep coming back to this. Gam kielech begay salmavet, even when I am walking in the valley. Salmavet has there are a couple of different understanding of it. Atzal, the first, this is, what do you call that? A portmanteau when a word is 2 words put together. Is that the right? So tzal means shadow. It's a standard word. It's not a very fancy word for shadow, but mavet means death. So tzal mavet is probably, it's either a portmanteau, a combined word, meaning the valley of the, so gay is a valley. Tzal mavet is either valley of the shadow, the shadow of death. Alter's reading of it is in the veil of death's shadow. And he argues that it might just be a poetic word for darkness, salmut, a poetic word for darkness, rather than salmavet. But so that's an interesting, which it is, but it is, the imagery I find very powerful. Even when we are walking in difficult, troubled times, where the shadow of destruction, where the shadow of death is hovering over us, what happens then? And here is where we shift from the first three psukim being about our relationship with Yud Hey Vav Hey. In the middle of crisis, in the middle of tragedy, in the middle of deep grief and despair, that's when our relationship can become deeply personal. And it shifts from lo ira, I will not fear ra, evil, ki, why not? Ki ata, because you. Now we're shifting from him or her or about God, and now the verse shifts and pivots. Now the speaker is going directly to the Holy One, which has, in whatever way, created the breath that we breathe. Ki ata imadi, because in some way I have comfort from you being im, with me. So this is the real shift. Shiftecha, and now all of this verse is speaking directly to Shiftecha, your shevet, and your mishantecha, and your often translated as rod and staff, meaning the things that a shepherd, the tools of the shepherd, the things that the shepherd does and has in order to take care of me, give me comfort. Hema, they, meaning these things, shiftecha umishantecha, hema, they, yenachamuni. So this is from the word to give, to be comforted. These things, they comfort me because those are the symbols of taking care of me. Ta'aroch, Yael?
I just put in the chat, I wanted to comment on the word gay. So
Okay,
the actual word is guy.
Yes.
It's pronounced, it has a patach, I think, not
Correct.
a tere. And gay means the guy of
Right.
some of it. So it's what we call smichut in Hebrew.
Right. There's a word in English for smichut. What is it? It's called.
Compound form.
No, it's a construct form or something. It means of. It means
Construct, okay.
of. It means of.
Because
You're right.
you actually have two of them. There's it's may. This is mayim, right?
Correct.
May menuchot.
Exactly.
Gay tzelmavet.
And b'maglei tzedek.
Right.
But smichut can be without that suffix. This is not my most sophisticated knowledge, but right, guy means valley. But in like Gehinom, it's the same thing. It's the valley of hell or Hinnom or whatever Hinnom is, or okay. All right, so these shiftecha and mashantecha are not weapons, they're the tools of the shepherd. So they're bringing the speaker comfort, the things that we see. We can't see God, but whatever it is that gives us comfort. Now, verse 5 remains in the direct speaking to Yud Hey Vav Hey. That's important about verse 5. Everything after verse 4 through the end. Ta'aroch, you will put. Aroch is to, you will, like Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch, as we call it, is a set table. You will set lifanai, and you will set in front of me Shulchan, a table. Shulchan is a regular, very common word for table. Neged, opposite to, against. Neged is all in opposition to. So right. Now think of all the different times we've seen this word in the Psalms as troubles or the people who cause me troubles. It could either be my troubles or the personification of the troublemakers. And again, we have that ending for mine. So somehow you are setting the table against my tzorai, so you are helping create some protection against those who are bringing me trouble or just against the troubles in my life. Again, Dishanta Vashemen Roshi, you put this oil on my head. And again, it sounds like the anointing and the feeling of having oil is a sign of wealth or of abundance. And then, of course, maybe the most famous phrase from the King James Version, Kosi Revaya, my cuppeth runneth over. I love it in the St. James. It's so great. Kosi, my cup, Rivaya is full or is abundant or is maybe even overflowing. But my cuppeth runneth overeth. I love that, whatever it is. We'll look at King James because it's, and then the final verse, which is 6. We've gone on this journey from somebody who's feeling no pain themselves, I think, but is aware of being taken care of, to somebody who goes through a tremendous crisis of despair and of grief and of fear, and then establishes a very personal, deep connection. As we all know, sometimes the most difficult moments in our life create the deepest sense of strength in looking back. It might, but while we're walking on that path, it's gates of it. It is a valley of the shadow of death. Ach is another great word because it's again, verbs didn't start this pasuk. It's another little bit of a disjunctive. And so Levi translated as for certain, and Alter says let, but. Kind of like there's again, what different translators do with these different verb words are fantastic. So for certain, Levi says, Tov v'chesed. Tov, we know that from Tov lahodot, from our psalm for Shabbat. Tov is essential goodness. It is the things that are right. The absolute Tov lahodot is essential to give thanks. So the essential goodness, Tov v'chesed. Chesed is the reference to the word of loving kindness, of gentle love, of love that is full of rachamim, of compassionate love. So goodness and love, Levi says, goodness and the love of your covenants, and Alter says goodness and kindness. Yirdefuni, fantastic verb here. I mean, so these things, rodef, the resh daled pei is the shoresh here, which means to pursue. A rodef shalom is a person who pursues peace. So a rodef is a pursuer, is the noun for pursuer for this, but this is saying, so that tov v'chesed, goodness and kindness and loving kindness, compassionate kindness, will pursue me. Again, the personal, kol yemei chayai, all yamim shel chayai, days of my life. Chayai, it's like chai or chayim, but it has that pronominal suffix meaning my life. These things of goodness, and notice it doesn't say wealth. What is the sign of being in a place of goodness? Is being pursued, is having things of love and goodness pursuing me all the days of my life. Vishavti, lashevet, is to sit or to live. We'll talk about that verb construct later. We don't have time right now. Be in veit, and this is also smichut. Bayit is the normal word, beit or veit because of the bet. The veit, in the house of. So smichut means the form of, like when we say something of, like the house of, this is smichut, the house of Yud Hey Vav Hey. Now it's interesting, and we're going to spend a lot of time on Psalm 23. So we've gone from Yud Hey Vav Hey is my shepherd, the feeling of being out in the world, being taken care of. And the end of the psalm ends, and my dream is to live, is to be beveit Yud Hey, in the house of Yud Hey Vav Hey, li'orech, for the length of, for the long period of yamim, days. Okay, so that is a quick, we've now done the overview with some of your, hopefully with your Hebrew, it's starting to look, and we have, is there any quick questions or comments before we end for today? That was a good
Gael
overview.
had her hand up, but I think we probably
No,
recognize
it's down
her.
now.
Okay.
So now that we've looked at this one, we're going to start now looking at some of the other translations, and we'll keep going back to working on the Hebrew. But please be comfortable saying the Hebrew is too hard, or only doing the level that feels comfortable to you, like just coloring it in.
Should we play out with that version we played in with, Rabbi?
Or do you want to do the other version of the women's choir?
I'll do.
Let's
whatever
do,
you want,
we have a
Rabbi.
version here of a women's choir.
You the boss. Hold on. Is that
Wonderful to
the,
be back with everybody studying. So we're going to
Wait.
play out with another version of Schenker's Mizmor LeDavid with a women's choir, which
Okay.
has a choral setting. It's a little different.
Let me see if I've got the right
With
thing.
MailChimp's recommendation
Hold
smarts,
on.
you'll get insights on what people are more likely to buy next.
Yes. Hold on.
So Harold, maybe we'll post those on the Facebook group so people can listen to them, and it's really spectacular. Go right to YouTube and not let it go through Zoom. Zoom
Right.
affects the music quality. But you can go to YouTube yourself and just put in Mizmor LeDavid Schenker, and you'll get so many different gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous versions. As you can see, they could be cantorial like the first one, or choral with a whole choral arrangement. And so there are a lot of different versions of it. All right, everybody, the room will stay open for a few minutes. And so nice to see you all back here. So sad to leave the time zone with Shari and Debbie and Darina, right, Darina? That's your time zone too?
Yes.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Till tomorrow.